Now today what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the trig functions. There's 6 of them. Today we're going to study 3 of them mainly. We're going to study the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. We're going to worry about the cosine, cosecant, and cotangent a little later in another lesson. But the 3 that we're going to worry about today are the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. Now remembering back to our geometry class a few years ago, we had a right triangle. And across from that right angle, we have a side length that has a specific name. And that side length is called the hypotenuse. Now the other 2 side lengths have names as well. They're each named the same thing. They're both named and called the legs. So we don't worry about the names exactly of the legs, but we do want to remember the specific name of that hypotenuse. Because if we look down, what we're going to do is we're going to find the ratio of sides using these trig functions. The sine, the cosine, and the tangent all have different ratio sides from the angle measure that is not the right angle. Now that is something really important to think about, is when we do these trig ratios, we do not use the angle from the right angle. Theta will either be, it'll be one of the 2 other angles. Now, from the theta angle, we have an opposite side, we have an adjacent side, and we have a hypotenuse. Yes, you could look at this and argue with me and say, yes, there are 2 adjacent sides. The red side and the green side are both adjacent. Remember, adjacent means next to. So there's a problem with one of the sides that's next to the theta angle because it has a specific name because it's across from the right angle, because that is called the hypotenuse. Okay? Now, using that angle measure theta, we have to find the opposite side. Well, opposite side is going to be the blue side length. Now, because we have the opposite and the hypotenuse labeled, the only adjacent side left is the green. So the green side is the adjacent side. And using those names, we'll come up with the ratios for the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. Moving on, let's see and let's look at those ratios. For the sine, we abbreviate it as sin. It's the opposite over the hypotenuse. Cosine is abbreviated COS and is the adjacent over hypotenuse. And the tangent is abbreviated with TAN and is opposite over adjacent. Now, these can get tough to remember. So we use SO, CA, TOA to remember that. And that just helps us remember exactly what we're talking about. Now, I've seen this written creatively a different way of writing SO, CA, TOA before as well. And that just writes out those ratios more specifically than in a linear line like I did the first time. So how would we write this out, and how does it look? Well, if we look at the sine, going from the sine of theta, which I've labeled out over here, remember that's going to be our opposite side length divided by our hypotenuse side length, and that will give us our ratio from that theta angle given our sine of that angle. It only works with right triangles. So, looking at, let's practice. Let's practice through one of these. I labeled out and reminded you from the previous slide up top what our trig ratios represent. Remember our abbreviation for that, or a way to remember, SO, CA, TOA. So let's find out what is the ratio of the sine from our theta angle. So this would be from theta, from theta, from theta, and what are those going to equal? Well, our sine, remember, is opposite. Our opposite side length is 4. Our hypotenuse side length is 5. Cosine, CA, is adjacent. So our adjacent side length is 3, and our hypotenuse side length is 5. TOA, our tan, is opposite So that has a side length of 4, and our adjacent has a side length of 3. And those will be our three ratios for sine, cosine, and tangent, given our side lengths of a 3, 4, 5 triangle. Now, we're going to try one on our own. Now, if you want to, let's pause the video so that you can do this on your own and make sure you solved it out correctly for this 5, 12, 13 right triangle. So go ahead and hit pause, fill it in on your sheet of paper, and then check your work in a second. Great job. Let's check and see what you did. Remember, sine, opposite, 12, hypotenuse, 13, cosine, adjacent, 5, hypotenuse, 13, our tangent, opposite, which is 12, and our adjacent, which is 5. Hopefully that is what you got for that answer. Excellent job. Now, go on and take the assessment little activity, the quiz, through QuizStar, and see how you do on this. Remember, you get 10 chances an hour each time. We want to hit that 100 mark. So once you hit that 100, you can stop. If you want to keep going and refresh it to see how many hundreds in a row you can get, you can always do that. But keep working through it. Hopefully within 10 tries, you'll get 100 on that. Great job today. Great lesson.